Hello, everyone. Today is the 14th of July, 2024, the day after, and I'm going to talk about what happened yesterday in politics, obviously in geopolitics. It was very late at night, and I had been reading, and before going to bed, I decided to check on one of the channels that I followed. It's a geopolitics channel from Argentina, as a matter of fact. Geopolitics with Ariel Umpierrez. I follow him. He's very sober, very experienced, and I always respect what he says. Anyway, and that was the first. It was only about an hour, no, half an hour after the incident with President Trump happened. And the information at the time was very limited, and all we knew at the time was that the attempt had been made, that he was okay, that the person, the shooter, was dead, and there might have been another, perhaps two people or one person dead and another two injured, something like that. Then I listened to him for a while. Then I went to check other channels, American channels, and other channels, and they were all kind of saying the same thing. We didn't have enough information. And so, with that limited information, I went to bed. I got up very late today because I had fallen asleep very late, and I haven't checked anything else today because I thought I am going to talk about this, and I don't particularly want to be influenced by anything or anybody. So all I know at the moment is late. It's 7 o'clock here in England on Sunday. All I know at the moment is what I knew last night. But as I got up, I had a message from my daughter, who is American, and a short message saying, have you heard the news? And I knew what she was talking about. And I said, yes, of course. And, I'm not really all that surprised. I always felt that something like this or similar to this would happen at the end. That they would try in one way or another to stop him, and I don't know what else I said. Now, it is my own personal situation that, well, I have two daughters and I love them dearly and they love me dearly. There is one thing we cannot discuss and talk about, and that is politics, because we are at completely opposite ends. It is a pity, because I would love to be able to discuss politics with them, but I can't. And they tell me that they don't want to hear it, and let's not discuss politics. And sometimes it has crossed my mind that I am using this channel actually to talk to them sort of indirectly, because I cannot do it directly. And so it has crossed my mind that I'm using you as my daughters or my sons in order to talk to them. So when I'm dead and gone, they might perhaps one day look at my videos and see that the progression of my thought and how I came to believe what I believe, stand on this end of the spectrum or whatever, but not in order to challenge them directly or confront them or tell them that they're wrong, but simply that they will realize how I came to believe what I believe in politics, what is happening anyway, my own personal point of view. And that might be the case, I don't know. But in any case, she replied to the message saying, who is they? And I knew that if I started explaining, she would perhaps get upset. And I said, look, if you ever reach the point where you can accept that in geopolitics and in politics there is a they or an it or whatever it might be, then perhaps we have some common ground. We can, in order to discuss it. I don't know what else I said, but I don't think she liked that reply. And she said, "It feels as if you're gaslighting me." Um, no, but in any case, okay. So I'm going to talk about this and why is it. I'm going to try to answer this question: is there a they or an it or not? And for that, you have to be patient with me a little bit, because I have to go down memory lane, because in order to explain how some of us on this side, society is, especially the West, is so terribly divided, how some of us are on this side and others are on that side, we need to go back and see how our political opinions are influenced by our life experience. That is what politics is. Sometimes it's not that, no one is absolutely 100% right or 100% wrong. We just have different experiences of life, and that shapes and colors our view of the world. And so I'm going to give you some examples, and then perhaps try to answer this question. Those of you who have been with me for a while, some of you have, I've been having this channel for about a year and a half, will forgive me if I go back, because you already know my story, because I have brought it up a number of times and so on, okay, in order to explain things. But forgive me if I mention it again. It's just that there are many people who are seeing this perhaps for the first time. They don't know. I'm just simply trying to make the point of how our political beliefs are influenced by the way we see the world. Okay, so in my own particular case, as I said, some of you already know it, but forgive me if I mention it again. Okay, I was raised in an orphanage. Okay, so I was there. I was brought up by nuns, and I was there from the age of 5 until the age of 17. So all my formative years were in that context. No problem sometimes when I say that I had a good childhood. People do not believe me. Many of them challenge me directly, saying that I am repressing something. It would take me a long time to explain why, but in any case, at the age of 18, I came to England, and I didn't know the language or anything, so I worked as a cleaner. I was a cleaner in hospitals for about 2 or 3 years, and I was learning the language and so on. Okay, so one day I remember that I saw in a magazine that I was reading about what to do in London. Some Time Out was the magazine. It was just starting at the time. This is very early 70s. And at the time, it was a sort of, I see now, a sort of an agitprop, kind of left-wing magazine. It has changed. I don't know whether it exists anymore. But anyway, something that actually changed my life is that I saw an ad, and it was written in Spanish. That is what attracted me to it. And it said, the Spanish Communist Party is holding a meeting, all welcome, blah, blah, blah. And it was in Spanish. And I thought, my goodness, the Spanish Communist Party. Franco was still there. I didn't know anything about communist or nothing. Nothing at all. But what I had learned as a child was, in the history lessons, was that there had been a civil war, and on one side were the nationalists, and on the other side were the Republicans and the communists. And I knew the leader of the Republican side was a communist, a very famous woman communist called in Spanish La Pasionaria, who then, after the Civil War, went to the Soviet Union. That's all I knew. And she was communist. That's all I knew. So I thought, my goodness, the Spanish Communist Party, Pasionaria. And I was attracted to it, and I went. And there, I don't remember what they talked about, but it was the usual, it was the workers are exploited and all this. Okay, so but this is the thing, this is what I'm getting at, that it made sense to me. It made sense to me, as if a window had been opened or some sort of light had been thrown onto. I began to, okay, there is a way of seeing society between the workers and the rulers and the ruling class and all. Anyway, it sort of made sense to me, and I want to share this with you because you see, it depends from where you come from and from which side you look at the world, that you're going to be formed and influenced. I hadn't known anything about communism, but I was immediately attracted to it. Why? Well, obviously because my formative years, and I was still very young, in my late teens or very, very early 20s. Why did that make sense to me? It wouldn't have made sense to many of you with a different life experience and different formative years. If you were, for example, had been, shall I say privileged? No, but, if you had a different kind of life where things, you could look at society from where you stood, you would see different things. If you look at society from down here and you're looking up, you see different things than if you're up there and you look down. That is going to form eventually your political stance and your political opinions. So all that made sense to me at the time. Of course, once you learn history and so on, you think you might end up in a different place. But that was the initial influence that it made sense to me. Also, and I had thought about this, this is a psychological point of view. I'm not a psychologist, I'm just making things up. I have a lot of theories, I can't prove any of them, but the fact that because my formative years had all been in a situation where we were all the same, we all wore the same uniform, we all had the same haircut. I remember my mother once visited me. It was an orphanage, but it didn't mean that we had all been abandoned. Many of us had not been abandoned, but it was for abandoned and very poor children, okay? And one day my mother visited me, And she told me that she was going to Madrid to work as a maid there. And my initial reaction was, oh, so you will be able in Madrid to go to the place where all the film stars live. And she said, the film stars, they don't all live in the same place. They all have different houses. And I thought, oh, really? So you see how my perception of the world was at that time, that it was perfectly normal for everybody to live in this one place, okay? But psychologically speaking, I see that perhaps apart from looking at the world from down up, I have also been influenced psychologically by the fact that I always tend to, as a reaction to everyone and everything being the same, that I am actually reacting to that, and I always tend to go in the opposite direction, you know. I don't want to say I'm a contrarian, because I try as best I can not to fall into that hole, but there is something within me, it's part of my personality or my psychological makeup, that if everyone goes in this direction and everyone is the same here, following this, I tend to, you know, want to go in the opposite way. And that has to go back to those early years, you know, a sort of perhaps when I was a child, wanting to stand out, doing things differently, or being more clever, or being more this, or being just to stand out from the crowd a little bit. And I wonder whether that has influenced me here too, in, you know, my later life and so on, because I find myself more comfortable being outside, being an outsider. Also the fact that I was then living in a country which was not where I was born. The language was different, the culture was different, and so on. So I was already automatically an outsider. And so my whole life, then I went to, very many years later, I married an American here, and then I went to the United States, and I was also an outsider there. So my whole life seems to have been that I have always been sort of an outsider, not part of a team of the whole of society, and that seems to have influenced me. And so I feel much more comfortable being outside. If I am inside with everybody else, I feel that I'm missing something. Anyway, I just try to analyze myself, which I'm not going to get anywhere there. But just to say that there is a certain inclination within me to always be outside looking in. And I feel very uncomfortable to be in part of the group, looking out to all those people who are different. I consider myself one of the different ones, as it were, looking in to what everyone else is doing. So you will not be surprised if, for example, with the pandemic thing, I was on this outside thing of the, what did they say, 10%, 20% who didn't quite agree with what the rest of society was doing. I was actually looking the other day, not long ago, a couple of week ago, cleaning my old documents, and I saw my initial appointment to go and take the injection, and this was in very early April 2020. Yeah, And what had happened was that at the beginning, when in England we went into lockdown, I believe it was early March. I'm not sure, but yeah, in March. And then we were told, was it 2021? Oh gosh, I forget now. But then we were told that the people over 60 would be the first ones to get the vaccine and to make an appointment and so on. And I did make the appointment. But between that time and when the day came, I had changed my mind. Won't go into that, but I thought, no, I'm not going to do this. So I remain on that outside part of it. And it was quite amazing to me to see what was happening. It was quite amazing to see the reaction of people when perhaps you didn't go along with everything. And I was very surprised. I think I mentioned this before. I'm getting to my point about Trump. Please forgive me, but it's just that it was very strange to me, for example, when the whole thing was at its maximum. You know, you cannot do this, you cannot do that, you need a passport, you cannot travel, all right? And the track and trace thing, and all that at the very optimum part of it, I was surprised to see. As I said, I mentioned it before, Noam Chomsky, Noam Chomsky, yeah, the great political analyst in sociology, politics, who wrote that most famous books in the 60s, the Manufacturing of Consent, telling people how the media manipulates you and this and that. And I was very surprised. There is some questions as to what actually he wrote the book himself or he was helped by others, but in any case, he's the one associated with that book. And I was surprised to see him saying, you know what, that the people who hadn't accepted the injection should stay at home and should not be allowed to go out at all. And I remember the interviewer asking him, but surely they have to go out to the supermarket or something. I mean, they need food. No, let them starve. He actually said that. If that could come from the person who wrote Manufacturing of Consent, I thought, my goodness, we are really deep into something that is going on. Very difficult to explain. And I said to my daughters, look, I am not going to do this. And it doesn't seem to be at the time that it would ease. Okay, so I said, you know, there is a possibility that I may never again be able to travel to go and see you in the United States, because I will not go through this thing. All right. You might have to come and see me, but I think it's going to be very difficult for me to ever lead a normal life again. I felt that at the time. And you might say, well, my goodness, would you sacrifice seeing your children again for something like this? And but it's I have to explain it, you see, because there are some things. It goes beyond being a political point, and it goes beyond being stubborn, and it goes beyond saying I am right and you are wrong. It's not that. There comes a time when you see things, you may be wrong, but you see things so clearly that you cannot bend that. It goes straight to how you see yourself as a human being and the dignity, human dignity that you cannot bend, because that means betrayal. Some people betray their country, some people betray their family, some people betray this or betray that because it's better for them in the future or whatever it is. Remember the capos in the in the 30s in Germany, who were, hopefully not many, but there were some Jewish people who were actually going against their own people, helping the enemy and so on. There always, to me, there are some things that you cannot betray, that you cannot change, that you cannot accommodate. And in my case, I see it as human dignity. I cannot betray that because, you see, ultimately, that is all I have. That is all I've ever had. I cannot go against that. If I see that I just cannot change it for, being okay with everybody else. I just can't do it. So this is where we end up in politics. I see certain things in the geopolitical world that I cannot ignore. Let me take a little break here because I'm going to drink a glass of water. Sorry. Okay, so let's come to Trump. I think that what happened at the beginning with President Trump is that because he's a businessman and he perhaps hasn't studied history or geopolitics as such, he was reacting from an instinctual level. Okay, so make America great again. I think he was trying to say, the manufacturing jobs have all disappeared to China. Let's make America the way it used to be, in the good old days, the 50s, the 60s, when people had jobs. And he didn't understand how anyone could be against what he was saying. I think it came as a surprise to him. It was purely instinctive on his part. How could anyone be against that? He couldn't understand it. What he didn't understand at the time was that, in my opinion, the United States was no longer the country that had been, because the United States as a country and as a government had been taken over by different interests which had a sort of a different objective, a global objective, a global governance objective, and it's not only the economic part. On top of it, there are other more important issues. But so he didn't understand that in his cabinet, in his administration, there might have been people who were saying, well, look, just let him do this and do that and say this and say that and do it. But the moment he steps over, because he doesn't realize it, the moment he steps over to directly or indirectly challenge those global interests, you have to stop it. He must not be able to go that far. He doesn't know why or why not, but so he wasn't aware of those other forces. He thought he was just fighting another political party with different ways of doing things, and he was much bigger than that. So, for example, when he was saying things like, okay, NATO, I mean, this is unfair. The United States is paying 4% of the total budget, and look at all those other countries in Europe. They are successful. They have free education. They have free national health. They have free this and free that. Why don't they pay? And they're supposed to pay 2%, and some of them, like Germany, are not even paying that. They're paying 0.9%. Well, this is unfair. They should. Otherwise, I'll do away with NATO. Well, of course, can't do. Be careful, he's dangerous. Doing away with NATO. NATO is the military side of this other interest, this transnational interest. You cannot do away with that. Yes, and so in many other things, you see. So he didn't know who his enemy was. Okay. And so but they had to fight him because what they couldn't possibly accept or tolerate was that the American people at one point would come to realize that their government did no longer belong to them. It belonged to other interests. That could not be shown, you see. So he was dangerous in that aspect. So of course you have the usual, the 4 years of fighting him at this level of, by all means, as it were, a total discredit of him as a politician, as a man, okay. And of course, you're going to have the parade of women who are raped, and I don't know that did they bring up any children that no, probably not. But anyway, everything else that you can, in order to disqualify him, this man is dangerous to our interests. So after he lost the election, a continuation of that, you cannot bring this man might figure it out, and this man is dangerous. And I thought, since they have tried everything else and it hasn't worked, what else is there to stop him? And what happened yesterday, to me, to my mind, and I think to the mind of quite a few people, was that was a real possibility. And I went back and forth on this because I thought, well, this sort of thing was too obvious and was too evident. This is the kind of thing you did in the 60s, President Kennedy, or in the 70s so many times in Latin America, in the 90s, in the Eurasia countries and so on. But it was just so evident that surely it cannot be, they cannot do it like this, so manually, as it were. And I went back and forth because then I thought about what is happening now in the world, and I thought, no, but it is evident now. It's obvious for everyone to see. So if, almost 1 million people, 500,000 people can die in the Ukraine and so many others wounded, or, in the Middle East, or this or that, and they don't mind that being obvious. Obviously, the fact that it is obvious and evident is not going to stop them. The point is no longer to hide the hand that moves the cradle, as it were. It doesn't matter. how it's done, but it has to be done. So I thought that this was manually like that a possibility. Now, what is going to happen now, because it failed, so there is this picture of him getting up and with his hand like that and saying, fight, fight, fight. And here is where people, ordinary people, disagree as to its meaning. And I can see it coming. You know, first of all, the reaction, I don't know what the reaction has been today. As I said, I haven't looked at any videos at all. I just wanted to go, you know, sort of my first reaction to all this. But you know what is going to happen? First of all, everyone is going to say, you know, what a terrible thing it is, and we abhor violence, and these sort of things should never happen, and this and that. Okay. It might move eventually within a week or two. Some voices will be raised to say, well, perhaps we have to look at people bearing arms, because you always have these crazy people who might do this and might do that. Eventually you get in the lone wolf thing. Okay. And then eventually within 2 or 3 weeks, again softly and gently at the beginning, you will be able to, some people will be asking questions. What did he mean by fight? And little by little, you see President Trump, you see he has to be careful, because there could be, some people could interpret it as an incitement to violence. And this is where he gets into problems, because he may not realize it, but he does incite people to violence. I mean, what else could he have possibly meant by saying fight, fight, fight? Do you see how that is going? If we will get there. And so you are going to have the two sides here. Some understanding what he meant by fight. Perhaps he has figured it out, and he said, we must pursue in this taking our country back. I don't know whether he's there yet. And the others who say, well, why would you tell people to fight and be violent and so on? Okay. Now, I say this not because I am, you know, if I were American, I would necessarily vote for him. Perhaps I would, because I wouldn't vote for the other side. But I see a sort of a minus here, in that I don't see him. He seems to understand the forces, the political forces in the Ukraine-Russia fight. And perhaps as a good businessman, he just said, look, this is it has to stop, whatever. But in the Middle East, he's not there. I don't think he has associated the two being part of the same day, or the same it. So in the end, if he hasn't connected the dots, nothing much would change, obviously. But in any case, okay, so what I'm going to end. I just wanted to say how in these times and in these political battles, one thing I think it's important that I mention this. I want to go back to the COVID thing a little bit. I started by saying that I was on that other side, on the, excuse me, 20% or whatever it was, okay? But in the majority opinion, now that the whole thing is gone and has been sorted out, we see different reactions. I have talked to people that have said, you know, I don't understand how I was so willing to go along with it. Perhaps I would have taken it nevertheless, but I actually did it without even thinking. And I understand that. I understand that. Going back to my point about from where you look at life, I understand that if you have been raised and if you are in your own life in a situation where you don't have to use survival skills, because life is, I don't want to say that you're a millionaire or anything like that, but life is fairly comfortable. There would be, I want to say that you have lost to a certain extent those survival instincts. In other words, I can see perfectly clearly how you would say, well, the government is saying that we have to do this. The government would not lie to us about something so important, of course, so we'll do it. I understand that. Okay. Because your life experience is such that it always worked for you, never against you, kind of thing. Okay, so that is a reaction that I see now from some people. From other people, a minority, I see that they went all the way, and now they're saying how terrible it was that they lied to us, and look at what happened and all. Okay, that's a minority. But I think there is still a residual there, I would say a third of the population, that was the one that was booing in Wimbledon. Novak, oh, what's his name? Novak Vesovic? Okay, forget his name. Anyway, this very famous tennis player, yeah. And they were booing him, yes, the other day. That is a side of the population who, in their heart of hearts, know, the back of their mind, know that they acquiesced perhaps a little bit too easily, but they do not want to accept that. And so the reaction is to blame still those who opposed it. Not because they believe that they were 100% wrong. That's another third. Those who said, you're stupid. No, of course you wouldn't. Okay, they're there. But those who know at the back of their minds that perhaps they were just a little tiny bit cowardly and cannot accept that, to look at themselves, to reflect upon that, and their possible shortcomings as to their reaction, the ones that now blame the messenger. I don't think they were booing him because of his tennis. I don't think they were booing him because he was playing badly. I think that it was because the fact that they still remember how he in Australia stood up and said, no, I will not take that. And he was not allowed to play, and he was jailed for a little while, I think, or something. It's seeing that person who stood up and knowing that you fail, that is what creates this reaction, and the booing, therefore, as if they could do away with what they know. Okay. And they can't, of course, so the booing would increase, you see. And this is the same in politics. There will be this reaction with the Trump thing. Those who will begin to see that perhaps the man was not this terrible monster, but they had been there, jacques, accusing him. And now they realized that perhaps they were not 100% right, or perhaps they overdid it. But that same third will continue to now fight against him again, because they cannot bring themselves to accept that perhaps they hadn't been 100% right. So we will see what happens. A lot of support for him at first, but then the reaction will come. And it will be not as great, those against him, as it was before, but it will be very active. Anyway, that will take me into speculations about the future. But it hasn't finished. The fight goes on. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.